Queen Zephyra's crystalline throne room echoed with the musical laughter of the Vorthak nobility. The sound was beautiful and terrifying, like wind chimes made of razor blades. Her four arms gestured gracefully as she reviewed the intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. "These humans," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 14 star systems, "they amuse me greatly." The assembled courtiers leaned forward, their luminescent skin patterns shifting with anticipation. General Krex, her most trusted military advisor, stepped forward with his report tablet glowing softly in his clawed hands. "Your Majesty, our scouts have observed their military capabilities extensively. They are primitive beyond belief." His mandibles clicked with what passed for disgust among his species. They still use projectile weapons, chemical explosives. Their largest vessels are barely the size of our patrol craft. The Queen's laughter intensified, a sound like crystal bells in a hurricane. Around the throne room, holographic displays showed human military footage captured by Vorthak surveillance drones. Tanks rolling across dusty battlefields, soldiers running with crude rifles, aircraft that moved at speeds the Vorthak considered laughably slow. "Look at them." She gestured toward the largest display, where a human soldier was shown taking cover behind a concrete barrier. They hide behind stones and metal like frightened prey animals. Their bodies are so fragile that tiny pieces of metal can kill them. No natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities, no psychic defenses. Lord Thane, her chief science advisor, approached with his own data pad. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he spoke. "My Queen, our biological analysis confirms your assessment. They have no redundant organs, their bones break easily, and they require constant intake of water and nutrients. Most remarkably, they can only survive in a very narrow range of atmospheric conditions." The court erupted in more melodious laughter. Queen Zephyra raised one of her hands for silence, her 3-meter-tall frame commanding immediate attention. Her skin patterns shifted to display amusement in bright golden swirls. "Tell me, General, how many of their worlds have significant military installations?" Krex consulted his tablet. "Approximately 47 planets have what they consider major defensive capabilities, Your Majesty. However, our analysis suggests that a single Vorthak battlecruiser could eliminate their entire home world's orbital defenses within one solar rotation. And how do they react to superior force?" The Queen's tone carried genuine curiosity now. "This is where they become truly pathetic." Thane interjected, his excitement causing his bioluminescent patches to flicker rapidly. "When faced with overwhelming odds, most species either surrender immediately or attempt to negotiate. Humans do neither. They continue fighting even when victory is impossible." The Queen tilted her massive head, intrigued. "Elaborate." "Our psychological profiles indicate they have a concept they call honor or duty that compels them to continue combat even when facing certain death. They seem to believe that dying while fighting is preferable to living in submission." More laughter filled the chamber, but this time it carried a note of bewilderment rather than pure amusement. "So they are not just weak and primitive," the Queen mused. "They are also fundamentally irrational. They choose death over the logical choice of surrender and eventual integration into a superior civilization." General Krex nodded enthusiastically. "Precisely, Your Majesty. They lack the intelligence to recognize when they are outmatched. In our simulations, this works entirely to our advantage. They will waste their resources in futile resistance rather than preserving them for productive purposes under our rule." The Queen stood from her throne, her impressive height casting shadows across the assembled nobles. The crystalline walls of the throne room amplified her voice as she spoke. "Then, we shall give them exactly what they desire. Let them have their glorious deaths. We will conquer their territories not because they pose any threat, but because their worlds contain resources we require. Their irrational resistance will provide entertainment for our forces." She gestured toward the tactical display showing the human territories. "General Krex, prepare the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. I want their outer colonies neutralized within 10 rotations. Make it clear to all Vorthak commanders that this is to be treated as a training exercise, not an actual war. Should we attempt to capture any humans for study? Thane asked hopefully. Their biological irrationality might provide insights into primitive evolutionary development. The Queen considered this briefly. A few specimens would be acceptable, but do not prioritize their capture. If they insist on dying rather than surrendering, accommodate their wishes. We have more important concerns than preserving an inferior species. As the court began to disperse to carry out their Queen's orders, Lord Vex, the keeper of historical records, approached the throne with unusual hesitation. Your Majesty, if I may venture a concern? Queen Zephyr's attention focused on him with laser intensity. Vex was ancient, even by Vorthak standards, and his counsel was usually worth hearing. Speak freely, Old One. In my studies of galactic conquest patterns, I have noticed that species which refuse to surrender despite overwhelming odds sometimes possess unexpected capabilities. Their irrationality may mask advantages that are not immediately apparent in our initial assessments. The Queen's laughter was softer this time, but no less dismissive. Vex, your caution has served us well in previous campaigns, but in this case, you worry unnecessarily. We have observed these humans for 3 full cycles. They have no hidden technologies, no secret alliances, no latent psychic abilities. They are exactly what they appear to be, a young, primitive species that has barely mastered interplanetary travel. She gestured toward the still-active displays showing human military exercises. Look at them, Vex. They practice warfare against each other because they have never encountered a truly alien threat. Their greatest military minds have never needed to conceive of enemies who operate outside their limited understanding of physics and biology. Vex bowed respectfully, his concerns apparently laid to rest. As always, Your Majesty's wisdom surpasses my own. I shall return to my archives and prepare historical documentation of our inevitable victory. As the throne room emptied, Queen Zephyra remained standing before the tactical displays. She studied the images of human soldiers, trying to understand what drove them to such apparent irrationality. In her long life, she had conquered species that fought brilliantly and species that surrendered immediately. She had faced enemies with superior technology and enemies with greater numbers. But she had never encountered a species that seemed so determined to fight despite having no apparent chance of victory. Perhaps, she murmured to herself, their irrationality will make the conquest more interesting than I initially thought. The displays continued showing human military activities, training exercises, patrol flights, and defensive preparations. To Queen Zephyr's eyes, it all looked like elaborate play acting by children who had never faced real danger. Soon, she thought with satisfaction, they would learn the difference between their games and actual warfare. The Vorthak fleet would teach them that lesson personally. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the sensor displays with growing concern. The unknown contacts had appeared at the edge of the system 3 hours ago, and their approach vector left no doubt about their intentions. How many ships are we looking at? Rodriguez, she asked her tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez consulted his screens, his face pale. Confirmed count is now at 47 vessels, Captain. The largest ones are reading as nearly 2 kilometers in length. Our computers can't even classify their technology signatures. Sarah nodded grimly. As commander of humanity's newest and most advanced warship, she hoped her first real test would come against pirates or raiders, not whatever this was. The Defiance was humanity's pride, equipped with the latest fusion drives and quantum torpedoes, but looking at these readings, she felt like she was commanding a wooden sailing ship against a fleet of aircraft carriers. Communications. Any response to our hails? Ensign Park shook her head. Nothing, Captain. We've transmitted on every frequency we know, including mathematical sequences and universal symbols. Either they're not receiving us, or they're choosing not to respond. The bridge's main screen flickered to life as the first clear visual of the alien fleet came through. The assembled officers fell silent, staring at vessels that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Smooth, organic curves reflected light in impossible ways, and energy patterns danced across their hulls like living things. My God, whispered Dr. Hayes, the ship's xenobiologist. They're beautiful. Beautiful things can still kill you, Sarah replied. her military training keeping her focused on the threat assessment. Rodriguez, time to intercept. At their current speed, approximately 18 minutes, Captain. Sarah activated the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We are about to make first contact with an alien species. Their intentions appear hostile, and their technological superiority is obvious. However, we are representatives of humanity, and we will conduct ourselves accordingly. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as crew members rushed to their posts. Sarah opened a channel to Fleet Command on Earth. Admiral Morrison, this is Captain Chun aboard the Defiance. We have contact with what appears to be an alien invasion fleet. Transmitting all sensor data now. The response came back after a delay that seemed to last forever. Admiral Morrison's weathered face appeared on the screen, and Sarah could see the weight of command in his eyes. Captain, we're seeing your telemetry. Strategic Command is mobilizing every available vessel, but you're looking at 6 hours minimum before the first reinforcements can reach you. Sarah felt her crew's eyes on her. They all knew what those 6 hours meant. The Defiance would face this alien fleet alone. Understood, Admiral. We'll buy you as much time as we can. Sarah, Admiral Morrison's voice carried decades of friendship along with his command authority. Don't try to be heroes. If you can extract tactical information and escape, that might serve humanity better than a noble last stand. With respect, sir, someone needs to show these aliens that humans don't run from fights. Even fights we can't win. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Godspeed, Captain. Make them remember that they met humanity today. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts for a few seconds before Dr. Hayes approached her. Captain, I've been analyzing their hull compositions from the sensor readings. The materials don't match anything in our databases. It's like they found ways to manipulate matter at a molecular level that we can't even theorize about. How does that help us fight them? Hayes looked uncomfortable. To be honest, Captain, it doesn't. I'm not sure our weapons can even damage their ships. But I thought you should know what we're facing. Sarah appreciated the honesty, even if it wasn't what she wanted to hear. She turned to Rodriguez. Tactical assessment. Our quantum torpedoes might penetrate their hulls if we can get close enough, but their point defense systems are already tracking our approach. They have at least 40 weapon emplacements visible on their lead ship alone, and that's just what our sensors can identify. Recommendations? Rodriguez straightened in his chair. Full attack run on their flagship, Captain. If we're going down, we should try to take their command vessel with us. Maybe show them we're worth taking seriously. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her crew. Every face on the bridge showed fear, but also determination. These people had volunteered to explore the unknown, and now they were willing to die defending their species. Very well. Helm, set intercept course for their lead vessel. Maximum burn. The Defiance accelerated toward the alien fleet, its fusion engines pushing the ship to speeds that would have been impossible just decades earlier. Sarah watched the range counter drop rapidly. Then, without warning, her communications panel activated. The voice that emerged was clearly artificial, but it spoke perfect English with no trace of accent or hesitation. Human vessel, you will cease your approach immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction. Sarah exchanged glances with her communications officer before responding. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance. You're in violation of human territorial space. State your intentions. The response came with what sounded like amusement. Captain Chun, your territorial claims are irrelevant. We are the Vorthak Empire, and we claim all resources in this sector. Your species will submit to imperial authority or be eliminated. That's not going to happen, Sarah replied firmly. Humanity doesn't submit to anyone. There was a pause, then something that might have been laughter. Captain, our scans indicate your vessel carries approximately 300 crew members. Our smallest escort ships carry crews of over 2,000. Our flagship alone could house your entire planet's population. You cannot seriously intend to fight us. Sarah felt her anger rising. The casual dismissiveness in the alien's tone reminded her of every bully she had ever encountered. Maybe you should scan a little deeper. You might learn something about human nature. We have studied your species extensively, Captain Chun. You are primitive, fragile, and fundamentally irrational. Your resistance serves no logical purpose. You're about to learn the difference between logic and courage, Sarah replied, cutting the communication. She turned to her crew, seeing the same anger reflected in their faces that she felt in her heart. These aliens thought humanity was some kind of joke, something to be dismissed and conquered without effort. All hands, this is the captain. The enemy has offered us a chance to surrender. I'm sure you can guess my response. We're going to show these Vorthack what happens when they underestimate humanity. Weapons free. All batteries, prepare to fire on my command. The Defiance raced toward the alien fleet, its crew ready to write the first chapter of humanity's war for survival. Behind them, Earth continued its frantic preparations, but for the next few hours, 300 humans would stand alone against an empire that had never encountered a species willing to fight a hopeless battle. Sarah Chun smiled grimly as she watched the range counter continue to drop. The Vorthack were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. They never knew when to quit. Aboard the Vorthack flagship Eternal Dominion, Fleet Commander Thaxis observed the approaching human vessel with mild interest. His tactical displays showed the primitive ship accelerating directly toward his fleet formation, apparently intent on some form of suicide attack. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "the human vessel has armed its weapons systems. Primitive fusion-based projectiles and some form of plasma discharge cannons." Thaxis's mandibles clicked with amusement. They actually intend to fight. How wonderfully absurd. He activated his communication system to address his fleet. "All vessels, maintain formation. We will allow the human ship to exhaust its weapons against our shields as a demonstration of their futility." On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Sean watched her tactical display as the alien fleet made no attempt to evade or disperse. They were maintaining their approach formation as if her ship posed no threat whatsoever. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "their lead ship is over 4 times our mass, and they're not even trying to avoid us. Either they're incredibly overconfident, or their defenses are beyond our ability to penetrate. Only one way to find out. All batteries, target their flagship. Fire when ready." The Defiance's quantum torpedoes streaked through space, followed immediately by plasma cannon bursts that lit up the darkness between the two fleets. The weapons struck the Vorthack flagship's energy barriers, creating brilliant displays of light and energy. Thaxis watched the light show with detached interest. "Damage report?" "None, sir. Their weapons barely registered against our primary shields. However, the energy signatures are intriguing. These humans have achieved fusion-based weapons with remarkably crude technology." "How quaint. Return fire. Single pulse, minimum power. Let us see how their vessel handles actual military-grade weapons." A single energy beam lanced out from the Eternal Dominion, striking the Defiance amidships. The human ship's hull glowed white-hot where the beam hit, but, to Thaxis' surprise, the vessel maintained course and structural integrity. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ship sustained significant damage, but remains operational. Their hull composition appears to include some form of reactive armor that dispersed our beam's energy." "Interesting. They are more resilient than our initial assessment suggested. Increase power by 20% and fire again." The second beam struck the Defiance with enough force to vaporize a small asteroid. Sarah felt her ship shudder around her as multiple systems failed simultaneously. "Damage report," she called out as emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red. "Hull breach on decks 5 through 7. Came to response from damage control. We've lost primary engines and weapon systems too, and for our offline. Casualties reported throughout the ship." Sarah gritted her teeth. One hit from their weakest weapon had crippled her ship, but they were still alive and still fighting. "Emergency power to remaining weapons. Continue the attack." Dr. Hayes looked up from his station with amazement. "Captain, they're not following up their attack. Our ship should be debris by now, but they're just watching us." Sarah realized what was happening. They're playing with us. We're entertainment to them. The realization filled her with cold fury. The Vorthack thought this was some kind of game, a chance to watch primitive humans struggle helplessly against superior technology. She activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, listen carefully. These aliens think we're a joke. They think human courage is just ignorance, and human determination is just stupidity. They're wrong, and we're going to prove it. Engineering, I need everything you can give me. If we're going down, we're taking some of them with us. Lieutenant Commander Park's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. Captain, I can give you one full power ramming run. We've got maybe 30 seconds of emergency thrust left in the fusion cores. Do it. The Defiance accelerated toward the Vorthack flagship like a wounded animal, making one final desperate attack. Sarah watched the range close rapidly, knowing that this would be her crew's last act. But as they approached, something unexpected happened. The smaller Vorthack escort vessels began moving to intercept. Sir, the Vorthack tactical officer reported to Thaxis. The human vessel appears to be attempting a ramming attack. Their primitive engines are achieving remarkable acceleration for their technology level. For the first time since the battle began, Thaxis felt a flicker of uncertainty. Ramming attacks were considered barbaric and irrational by Vorthack military doctrine. No logical commander would sacrifice an entire ship and crew for the minimal chance of damaging a single enemy vessel. Defensive positions. Do not allow them to reach our hull. 3 escort ships moved to block the Defiance's path, their weapons charging for a coordinated strike that would completely destroy the human vessel. Sarah saw them coming and realized her ship's final desperate attack would be stopped short of its target. But as she watched, something remarkable happened. The lead Vorthack escort ship hesitated for just a moment, as if its commander couldn't quite believe that a smaller vessel would deliberately collide with it. That moment of hesitation was all Rodriguez needed. Despite the damage to his targeting systems, he managed to lock onto the escort ship's weapon arrays. All remaining batteries concentrated fire on the lead escort. Fire! The Defiance's last functional weapons discharged everything they had left. Quantum torpedoes and plasma bursts struck the Vorthack escort at point-blank range, and, for the first time in the battle, Sarah saw real damage to an alien ship. The escort shields flickered and failed, and explosions blossomed along its hull. The damaged escort ship collided with the Defiance a split second later. Both vessels exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the space between the two fleets. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Thaxis stared at the expanding debris field in stunned silence. In over a century of military service, he had never seen anything like what he had just witnessed. The humans had knowingly sacrificed their entire ship and crew to destroy a single escort vessel. Status of the Razor Wing? He asked quietly. Destroyed, sir. All hands lost. Thaxis tried to process what had happened. The human vessel had been hopelessly outmatched, facing certain destruction, but instead of surrendering or attempting to escape, they had chosen to inflict as much damage as possible before dying. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving transmissions from the human homeworld. Multiple ships are accelerating toward our position. Thaxis studied the tactical display, showing dozens of new contacts emerging from Earth's orbital shipyards. Each ship was larger than the Defiance, and they were all heading directly for his fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, Fleet Commander Thaxis wondered if Queen Zephyr's assessment of human military capabilities might have been incomplete. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Prepare for extended combat operations. It appears these humans have more surprises in store for us. As the reinforcements from Earth approached, Thaxis found himself thinking about the courage it had taken for the crew of the Defiance to make their final attack. In Vorthack culture, such sacrifice was considered irrational and wasteful. But watching the expanding debris field where 300 humans had chosen to die, fighting rather than live in defeat, he began to suspect that there were forms of strength that Vorthack military doctrine had never accounted for. The war was just beginning, and Thaxis was no longer certain it would be the easy victory Queen Zephyra had promised. Colonel Marcus Kane had been fighting for 6 hours straight, and his powered armor servos were starting to overheat. The Vorthack ground assault on New Geneva had turned the planetary capital into a nightmare of burning buildings and desperate urban combat. Around him, the remnants of the 3rd Marine Battalion held their positions in what had once been the city's financial district. They were surrounded, outnumbered 10-1, and completely cut off from orbital support. By any rational military assessment, they should have surrendered hours ago. Colonel, Sergeant Major Williams crawled up beside him, her armor scarred and blackened from alien energy weapons. We've got maybe 30 rounds left per Marine, and medical supplies are exhausted. The aliens are setting up for another push. Marcus peered around the corner of their improvised barricade. Across the plaza, Vorthak soldiers were positioning what looked like heavy artillery. Their movements were precise and coordinated, but Marcus noticed something that had been bothering him all day. They fought like they expected easy victory. "They're not used to this," he murmured. "Sir, look at their formation. They're grouped too tightly, their advance is textbook perfect, and they're taking no precautions against desperate defenders. They fight like they've never faced an enemy willing to die for ground they can't hold." Williams followed his gaze. "What are you thinking, Colonel?" Marcus checked his ammunition counter one more time. 17 rounds left in his primary weapon, plus 2 grenades and a combat knife that had belonged to his grandfather. Not much to work with, but then again his grandfather had fought at Guadalcanal with even less. "I'm thinking it's time to show these aliens what human warriors look like when they stop playing defense." He activated his comm system to address what remained of his battalion. "All units, this is Kane. We've been fighting like this is a conventional battle, but conventions don't apply when you're facing extinction. It's time to remind these invaders why Earth predators evolved to hunt in packs." Marcus stood up from behind cover, exposing himself to enemy fire. Vorthak energy weapons immediately began tracking toward him, but he was already moving. His powered armor carried him in a zigzag sprint across the plaza, drawing the aliens' attention while his Marines used the distraction to reposition. The Vorthak soldiers were clearly confused by this deviation from human tactics. Their defensive doctrine assumed enemies would maintain cover and attempt to preserve their forces. Marcus's suicidal charge directly into their formation violated every principle of logical warfare. But Marcus wasn't fighting logically. He was fighting like a human. His first grenade detonated in the center of the Vorthak heavy weapons position, scattering alien soldiers who had never learned to expect desperate individual attacks. Before they could recover, Marcus was among them with his knife. Vorthak combat doctrine emphasized range combat with advanced energy weapons. Close quarters fighting was considered primitive and beneath their technological superiority. None of them had trained extensively for hand-to-hand combat against an opponent who didn't care if he survived the next 60 seconds. Marcus's knife found weak points in alien armor with the precision of generations of human warfare. His ancestors had fought with bronze spears and iron swords, had learned to kill or be killed in muddy trenches and burning cities. That knowledge lived in his muscles and his instincts. The Vorthak soldiers tried to fall back to a safe distance where they could use their energy weapons effectively, but Marcus followed them. His powered armor allowed him to move faster than they had expected, and his complete disregard for his own safety made him unpredictable. Behind him, his Marines were advancing with the same terrifying determination. They moved like wolves, using cover and coordination that spoke of millions of years of predatory evolution. Each Marine fought as if they were personally responsible for defending their species' survival. Squad leader Thompson cornered 3 Vorthak soldiers in a destroyed storefront and attacked them with nothing but his combat knife and his bare hands when his ammunition ran out. Private First Class Chun used her last grenade to collapse a building on an alien command post, trapping herself in the rubble but eliminating an entire enemy squad. The Vorthak formation began to collapse under the psychological pressure of facing enemies who fought with no regard for tactical preservation. Their communications filled with panicked reports of humans who continued attacking even after suffering wounds that should have been incapacitating. Lieutenant Zax, commanding the Vorthak ground assault, watched his tactical display with growing alarm. His forces still outnumbered the humans significantly, but his casualty reports were climbing at an impossible rate. The human Marines were fighting like they were already dead, throwing themselves at superior forces with a savagery that defied comprehension. "Command, this is Ground Assault Leader Zax. We are encountering unexpected resistance. Request immediate reinforcement and orbital bombardment of human positions." The response crackled back through his comm system. "Negative, Zax. Queen Zephyra wants prisoners for study. Continue the assault with current forces." Zax stared at his display, showing human positions that should have been overrun hours ago. His soldiers were reporting that the humans fought with increasing desperation as their situation became more hopeless, rather than a logical response of seeking surrender terms. On the ground, Marcus had lost track of how many Vorthack soldiers he had killed. His armor systems were failing one by one. His ammunition was completely exhausted, and he could feel blood running down his side from an energy weapon burn that had penetrated his armor. But he was still fighting, and around him, his Marines were still fighting. Sergeant Major Williams appeared beside him, firing her sidearm at a group of aliens trying to flank their position. "Colonel, we've got movement on the north side. Looks like they're bringing up their heavy armor." Marcus looked where she was pointing and saw massive Vorthack war machines moving into position. Each one was the size of a building, armed with weapons that could level city blocks. His remaining Marines had no equipment capable of damaging such vehicles. "How many of us are left?" Williams did a quick count. 14, sir. 14 out of the original 300. Marcus nodded grimly. 14 Marines against an alien army supported by heavy armor. Any sane military commander would call for surrender. But Marcus Kane had not survived tours on 3 different hostile worlds by being sane. He had survived by being willing to do things that no reasonable person would consider. "Williams, gather everyone at the fountain in the center of the plaza. We're going to make our last stand right there in the open." "Sir, if these aliens want to see what humans are made of, let's give them a demonstration they'll never forget." As his 14 Marines gathered around the destroyed fountain that had once been the centerpiece of New Geneva's government district, Marcus looked up at the Vorthack ships hovering overhead. Somewhere up there, alien commanders were learning that human military capabilities couldn't be measured by their technology alone. The lesson was about to get much more intensive. Queen Zephyr's laughter had stopped 3 hours ago. She stood before the tactical displays in her private war room, watching feeds from multiple battle zones across human space. The conquest that was supposed to take days was stretching into weeks, and her casualty reports made no sense. "Explain this to me again," she demanded of General Krex, her voice carrying dangerous undertones. A single human battalion held the capital of New Geneva for 18 hours against a full-ground assault force. Krex's skin patterns flickered with nervous anxiety. "Your Majesty, the humans employed unconventional tactics. They seemed to fight with complete disregard for military logic or self-preservation. Our forces were unprepared for enemies who would sacrifice themselves to inflict minimal damage." The Queen activated a specific feed from New Geneva, showing the final moments of Colonel Kane's last stand. 14 human Marines, their armor broken and weapons exhausted, had stood in the center of a destroyed plaza and fought Vorthack heavy armor with improvised explosives and handheld weapons. They had been killed to the last Marine, but not before destroying 2 war machines and inflicting casualties that forced the Vorthack assault to pause for regrouping. "These humans lost," she said slowly, "but they made us pay a price for every meter of ground. They turned their defeats into victories of attrition." Lord Thane approached with fresh intelligence reports, his 6 eyes blinking rapidly with stress. "Your Majesty, our behavioral analysis teams have identified the source of human military effectiveness. They possess what they call warrior culture, a psychological conditioning that makes them more dangerous as their situation becomes more desperate. Elaborate. When most species face inevitable defeat, their survival instincts compel them to surrender or flee. Humans experience the opposite reaction. Hopeless situations trigger increased aggression and complete disregard for personal survival. They literally become more dangerous when they should become less dangerous." Queen Zephyra studied the tactical displays showing 17 different battle zones. In every case, human forces had been defeated eventually, but the cost to her empire was mounting exponentially. "What are our total casualties?" Krex consulted his reports reluctantly. 43 ships destroyed, over 12,000 ground troops killed, and 31 senior officers lost. "We have successfully occupied 11 human colony worlds, but the humans have evacuated most civilians and are conducting guerrilla operations from concealed positions." The Queen's 4 arms gestured sharply with frustration. 12,000 casualties to conquer 11 primitive worlds? Our entire conquest of the Nexari Empire cost us fewer than 3,000 dead, and they were a spacefaring civilization with energy weapons technology. Fleet Commander Thaxis entered the war room, having just returned from the front lines. His armor showed burns from human weapons, and His usual confidence was notably absent. Your Majesty, I must report developments that require immediate strategic reassessment. Speak. The humans have begun adapting to our tactics faster than our models predicted. They're modifying their weapons to exploit weaknesses they've identified in our defenses. More critically, they're sharing tactical intelligence across their entire military network in real time. Queen Zephyra felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. Are you suggesting they're learning from their defeats? More than that, Your Majesty. They're deliberately sacrificing units to gather intelligence, then immediately applying that knowledge across all their remaining forces. Their losses are training their survivors to fight us more effectively. The Queen activated communications to address her field commanders directly. All unit leaders, report your current assessment of human military capabilities. Responses came in from across human space. Each report painted the same picture. Human forces that fought with increasing effectiveness despite suffering continuous defeats. They were learning, adapting, and becoming more dangerous with each engagement. Your Majesty, reported Ground Commander Vex from the Proxima Centauri system. Human defenders have begun using their own casualties as weapons. They're rigging their dead with explosive devices and using the bodies as improvised mines. Our troops are now afraid to approach human positions even after confirmed kills. This is Fleet Leader Nax from the Ross 128 engagement. Human pilots are deliberately ramming our ships when their weapons are ineffective. We've lost 6 interceptors to suicide attacks that should have been minor skirmishes. Colony Assault Leader TYX reporting from Kepler 442. The humans have poisoned their own water supplies rather than allow us to capture them intact. They're destroying anything that might be useful to us, even if it means their own people will suffer. Queen Zephyra listened to the reports with growing unease. Everything her military commanders were describing violated basic principles of rational behavior. Species were supposed to preserve their resources, protect their civilians, and seek terms for surrender when facing superior force. General Krex, she said slowly, what does our psychological analysis suggest will happen if we continue this campaign? Krex hesitated before responding. Your Majesty, our xenopsychologists believe that prolonged warfare will only strengthen human resistance. They call it total war doctrine, the complete mobilization of an entire species for military purposes. Every human civilian becomes a potential combatant. Every human world becomes a fortress, and every defeat becomes motivation for increased resistance. The Queen studied the star map, showing the extent of human space. 57 worlds, most of them only lightly defended by her standards. But if each world fought like New Geneva, if every human soldier fought like Colonel Kane, if the entire species was willing to destroy itself rather than submit to her rule, how many casualties do our models project for complete conquest of human space? Thane consulted his analysis computers. Assuming current resistance patterns continue, we project between 800,000 and 2 million Vorthak military deaths, plus extended occupation forces to prevent insurgency operations. The throne room fell silent except for the humming of tactical displays. Queen Zephyra had conquered 14 civilizations, but she had never faced an enemy willing to pay any price to resist her rule. Your Majesty, Old Lord Vex spoke carefully. There is another consideration. Our forces are reporting psychological stress from fighting enemies who show no fear of death. Many of our soldiers are requesting transfers away from human engagement zones. Queen Zephyra realized that her perfect conquest was becoming a nightmare. The humans were turning her military superiority into a liability by simply refusing to acknowledge it. They fought as if her advanced weapons and superior numbers were irrelevant, and somehow that made them irrelevant. We are fighting an enemy that cannot be defeated by conventional means, she admitted finally. They do not surrender when they should surrender. They do not flee when they should flee. They do not negotiate when they should negotiate. She paused, studying the image of Colonel Kane's final charge on the displays. One human soldier with a knife, attacking a war machine. It should have been pathetic. Instead, it was terrifying. General Krex, issue new orders to all fleet commanders. We will withdraw from human space and establish a defensive perimeter. This species is too dangerous to conquer. The assembled nobles stared at their queen in shock. In 300 years of imperial expansion, the Vorthak had never retreated from a militarily inferior opponent. Your Majesty, Krex ventured, retreat will be seen as weakness by other species. It may encourage resistance throughout the Empire. Queen Zephyra's laughter returned, but this time it carried no amusement. It was the sound of someone who had learned a terrible lesson. Then, let them know the truth, General. Let every species in this galaxy understand that we retreated from the humans not because we could not defeat them, but because the cost of defeating them would destroy us in the process. She gestured toward the tactical displays, still showing human military positions. They are apex predators who evolved to hunt creatures larger than themselves. They are pack hunters who become more dangerous when cornered. They are survivors who view extinction as preferable to submission. The Queen's four arms spread wide in a gesture of acknowledgement. I laughed at humanity, but Colonel Marcus Kane taught me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to act despite fear. And his people have that courage in abundance. As the Vorthak fleet began its withdrawal from human space, Queen Zephyra issued one final order. Classify humanity as a level 10 threat species. They are never to be approached or engaged under any circumstances. Some enemies are too dangerous to fight, even when you can defeat them. The galaxy had learned a new lesson about the small, primitive species from Earth. Humanity might not have the most advanced technology or the largest military, but they possess something that made them truly terrifying: the absolute refusal to be conquered.